March 16, 1943. The North Atlantic, 400 miles southwest of Iceland. Dawn breaks cold and gray over convoy HX-229. 43 merchant ships plowing eastward through 8-foot swells. In the engine room of the Liberty ship James Oglethorpe, 20-year-old machinist mate Tommy Rodriguez from San Antonio wipes grease from his hands and checks his watch. 6 hours until his next shift. The steady thrum of diesel engines below decks mingles with the sound of waves slapping against steel hulls. Coffee brewing in the galley carries the aroma of home across an ocean that has become humanity's largest graveyard. Rodriguez doesn't know it yet, but 16 German U-boats are converging on his position. In 48 hours, 13 ships from his convoy will rest on the ocean floor, 2 miles beneath the waves. But neither does he know that this massive convoy battle, the largest of the entire war, will mark the beginning of the end for the German submarine campaign that has terrorized the Atlantic for 3.5 years. This is the story of how American industrial might, British cryptographic brilliance, and the blood of merchant sailors turned the tide in history's longest military campaign. It is the story of how democracy's abundance ultimately crushed fascism's hunger beneath the waves of the North Atlantic. When Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, Grand Admiral Karl Donitz commanded just 57 operational U-boats. In his naval headquarters in Wilhelmshaven, studying charts of the Atlantic shipping lanes, Donitz understood a fundamental truth that would shape the next 6 years of warfare. Britain was an island nation that imported 60% of its food and virtually all of its raw materials. Cut those lifelines and the British Empire would starve into submission within months. Donitz had calculated the mathematics of maritime strangulation with Prussian precision. Britain's merchant fleet totaled approximately 3,000 ships, representing 17.5 million tons of cargo capacity. To cripple British resistance, he needed to sink 750,000 tons of shipping per month, more than Britain could possibly replace. With a fleet of 300 Type 7 U-boats operating in coordinated wolf packs, Donitz believed he could force Britain's surrender before American industrial capacity could tip the balance. "The Battle of the Atlantic is the decisive battle of this war," he told his submarine commanders in the autumn of 1939. "Everything else is secondary." But Donitz faced a critical shortage. Hitler had promised him those 300 U-boats by 1944, but the Führer's obsession with surface ships and land campaigns left the submarine arm chronically under-resourced. When war erupted, Donitz possessed fewer than 60 operational boats, barely 20% of what he needed to strangle Britain. Still, in those early months, his submarines achieved devastating success. Operating individually at first, U-boats stalked British shipping with methodical efficiency. The passenger liner Athenia, torpedoed just hours after Britain declared war, signaled Germany's return to unrestricted submarine warfare. By Christmas 1939, U-boats had sunk 114 merchant ships, totaling 421,000 tons. For U-boat crews, these early victories seemed to validate their training and their cause. Kapitän-Leutnant Günther Prien, who had famously penetrated the British naval base at Scapa Flow and sunk the battleship Royal Oak, wrote to his wife, "We are the hunters and the Atlantic is our hunting ground. Every ship we sink brings the homeland one step closer to victory." Young German submariners believed they were fighting a clean war against military targets. They had been trained to surface after torpedo attacks to ensure merchant crews had time to abandon ship, to respect the ancient laws of the sea. Many genuinely believed they were serving a noble cause, protecting the fatherland from British economic warfare, fighting for Germany's rightful place in the world. But the reality of total war quickly eroded such chivalrous notions. As Britain organized merchant ships into protected convoys, U-boat commanders found themselves forced to attack without warning, to fire multiple torpedoes at single targets, to leave survivors floating in lifeboats hundreds of miles from land. The mathematics of tonnage warfare left no room for mercy. By the spring of 1940, with Germany's conquest of Norway and France, Donitz had acquired submarine bases along the entire Atlantic coast of Europe. From Brest, Lorient, La Pallice, Saint-Nazaire, and Bergen, his U-boats could reach deep into the Atlantic without the fuel limitations that had constrained operations from German ports. The wolf packs were unleashed. The new tactics were revolutionary. Instead of hunting alone, U-boats would patrol in long, coordinated lines across the major shipping routes. When one submarine spotted a convoy, it would shadow the merchant ships while radiating their position to U-boat headquarters in France. Dönitz and his staff would then vector every available submarine toward the target, creating a concentration of force that could overwhelm any escort. The period from June 1940 to February 1941 became known to U-boat crews as the happy time. In those 8 months, German submarines sank 1,395 merchant ships totaling nearly 6 million tons, an average of 7 ships every day. The wolf packs roamed the Atlantic almost unmolested, surfacing at night to pursue convoys at high speed, diving at dawn to avoid aircraft patrols. Korvettenkapitän Otto Kretschmer, ace commander of U-99, perfected the night surface attack. He would position his submarine inside a convoy formation and fire torpedoes at point-blank range before diving and escaping in the confusion. In 17 months of operations, Kretschmer sank 44 ships, totaling 266,629 tons, earning him the nickname Silent Otto and the Knight's Cross with oak leaves. For German submariners, these were intoxicating months. They saw themselves as modern-day knights of the sea, their submarines sleek steel steeds carrying the fight to Germany's enemies. Each patrol brought new victories, new tonnage tallies, new decorations. U-boat crews developed their own mythology: the lucky submarine, the charmed commander, the invincible wolf pack. But even during the happy time, perceptive U-boat officers noticed troubling signs. British convoy escorts were becoming more numerous and better organized. Radar-equipped destroyers could detect surface submarines at increasing ranges. Aircraft patrols forced the boats to remain submerged during daylight hours, dramatically reducing their operational effectiveness. More ominously, the Americans were clearly preparing for war. Throughout 1941, U.S. Navy destroyers escorted British convoys halfway across the Atlantic under the pretense of neutrality patrols. American shipyards were launching Liberty ships faster than U-boats could sink them. In the battle of production, Germany was already losing. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and Hitler declared war on the United States 4 days later, he handed Dönitz the opportunity he had been waiting for: a chance to strike at unprepared American shipping along the eastern seaboard. Operation Drumbeat, launched in January 1942, sent just 5 U-boats to American waters. The results exceeded Dönitz's most optimistic projections. American coastal cities remained fully illuminated, silhouetting merchant ships against the glare for U-boat commanders. The U.S. Navy had virtually no anti-submarine capability, no organized convoy system, no effective coordination with civilian authorities. In 6 months, 21 U-boats operating off the American coast sank 397 ships, totaling over 2 million tons. Captain Lieutenant Reinhard Hartigan, commander of U-123, described the American coast as a second happy time, even better than the first. His submarine operated so close to shore that his crew could smell land, see automobile headlights, hear American radio broadcasts. One night off Cape Hatteras, Hartigan sank 4 tankers in a single attack, the oil fires visible from the North Carolina beaches. American merchant sailors, accustomed to peacetime regulations and unaware of submarine tactics, died by the hundreds. Many ships sailed without radios, without lookouts, without any concept of the danger lurking beneath the waves. The tanker Dixie Arrow, torpedoed off Cape Hatteras on March 26, 1942, burned for 6 hours while her crew roasted in the flames. Only 11 of the 33 men aboard survived. But American sailors adapted quickly to their new reality. Merchant Marine officer Felix Reisenberg, Jr., whose ship had been torpedoed off New Jersey, wrote, "We learned to sleep in our clothes, to keep our life jackets close, to watch the horizon with new eyes. Every oil slick might be a periscope, every shadow might be death. But we kept sailing, kept carrying the cargo, kept fighting our own war against fear." The symbolic object that represented America's response to the U-boat threat was not a weapon, but a welding torch. In shipyards from Maine to California, American workers were building Liberty ships faster than any enemy could sink them. The Robert E. Perry, launched in Richmond, California, was built in just 4 days and 15 hours from keel laying to launch, a feat of industrial organization that would have been impossible under any other economic system. Henry Kaiser's shipyards employed revolutionary mass production techniques adapted from the automotive industry. Standardized components, prefabricated sections, assembly line construction methods reduced the time required to build a Liberty ship from 244 days in 1941 to just 42 days by 1943. American shipyards were launching 3 new merchant vessels every day, more than replacing the ships being sunk by all Axis submarines combined. Each Liberty ship represented 10,500 tons of cargo capacity, enough to carry 9,000 tons of steel, 440 tanks, 2,840 vehicles, or food supplies for 225,000 troops for one day. More importantly, each ship embodied American industrial democracy in action. Built by union workers earning middle-class wages, financed by war bonds purchased by ordinary citizens, manned by volunteer merchant sailors from every ethnic background. German submarine crews, accustomed to their nation's chronic shortages, could barely comprehend the scale of American production. U-boat commander Peter Kramer wrote in his memoir, "Every ship we sank was replaced by 2 more. Every cargo we sent to the bottom was matched by 10 times as much rolling off American assembly lines. We were fighting not just the British Navy, but the entire industrial capacity of the New World." Yet even as American shipbuilding reached unprecedented levels, the U-boat war was entering its deadliest phase. By early 1943, Dönitz commanded over 400 operational submarines, more than 7 times his strength at the start of the war. New Type 7 and Type 9 boats incorporated the latest technology: improved torpedoes, longer-range batteries, enhanced communication equipment, radar detectors. The March 1943 convoy battles represented the climax of the Atlantic struggle. In a single week, wolf packs attacked convoys HX-229 and SC-122 in the largest U-boat operation of the war. 41 German submarines participated in the coordinated assault, sinking 21 merchant ships in 6 days. For Dönitz, the victory seemed to vindicate his strategic vision. Concentrated U-boat attacks could still overwhelm Allied defenses. But the German submarine commanders engaged in these battles reported disturbing developments. Allied escort ships were more numerous, better equipped, and tactically superior to anything they had faced before. Radar-equipped aircraft could locate surfaced U-boats at night. New depth charges and Hedgehog anti-submarine mortars were claiming increasing numbers of German boats. Most ominously, Allied forces seemed to possess uncanny knowledge of German submarine movements. Convoys changed course just before encountering Wolfpack patrol lines. Allied aircraft appeared precisely where U-boats were attempting to concentrate. Radio transmissions from German naval headquarters were answered by immediate Allied countermeasures. What the German submarine commanders could not know was that their most secure communication system had been systematically compromised for over a year. At Bletchley Park, 50 miles north of London, a team of British cryptographers led by Alan Turing had achieved one of the most important intelligence breakthroughs in military history. They had broken the German naval Enigma code. The Enigma machine was Germany's most sophisticated cipher system, electromechanical device that could generate over 158 trillion possible combinations for encoding messages. German naval commanders considered Enigma communications absolutely secure, using the system to coordinate submarine operations across the entire Atlantic theater. Breaking naval Enigma required more than mathematical brilliance. It demanded physical possession of German cipher materials. On October 30, 1942, in the eastern Mediterranean, the British destroyer HMS Petard depth-charged U-559 until the German submarine was forced to surface. As the U-boat's crew abandoned ship, 3 British sailors swam to the sinking vessel and entered its conning tower.
Able seaman Colin Grazier and Lieutenant Tony Fasson descended into the flooding submarine to retrieve codebooks and cipher materials. Working in water up to their chests, they passed the precious documents to canteen assistant Tommy Brown, who swam them back to the petard. When the U-boat suddenly plunged toward the bottom, Grazier and Fasson were trapped inside. Both men drowned, but their sacrifice provided Bletchley Park with the materials needed to break naval enigma. Within weeks of receiving the captured documents, Turing and his team were reading German submarine communications in near real time. Every U-boat position report, every Wolfpack coordination message, every operational order from Donitz's headquarters was intercepted, decoded, and transmitted to Allied naval commanders within hours. The intelligence breakthrough, codenamed Ultra, transformed the Battle of the Atlantic. Allied convoys could now be routed around German submarine patrol lines. Wolfpack concentrations could be disrupted before they achieved tactical surprise. Individual U-boats could be hunted down with precision previously impossible. But Ultra's greatest contribution was strategic rather than tactical. By reading German assessments of submarine losses, Allied commanders understood that the U-boat campaign was approaching a critical threshold. Each submarine sunk represented not just a tactical victory, but an irreplaceable loss of trained personnel. Germany's submarine training program could not replace experienced crews at the rate they were being destroyed. The crisis came in May 1943. In that single month, Allied forces sank 43 German submarines, more U-boats destroyed than in the first 2 years of the war combined. German submariners called it Black May, a month when the hunters became the hunted on an unprecedented scale. The transformation was visible in the statistics that Dönitz studied in his headquarters. In 1940, each operational U-boat had sunk an average of 8,000 tons of Allied shipping per month. By early 1943, that figure had fallen to just 2,800 tons per boat per month. Simultaneously, U-boat losses were climbing towards unsustainable levels. In May 1943, Germany lost 1 submarine for every 10,000 tons of shipping sunk, an exchange rate that guaranteed defeat. Young German submarine crews now faced survival odds that would have been unthinkable during the happy time. U-boat service, once the elite branch of the German Navy, became a sentence to probable death. Of the 40,000 Germans who served in U-boats during the war, 30,000 never returned home, a casualty rate of 75%, the highest of any military service in any nation during World War II. Oberbootsmann Heinrich Bleithrodt, a veteran of 25 combat patrols, wrote to his family in May 1943, "The sea has turned against us. Where once we hunted freely, now we are the prey. American aircraft find us wherever we surface. British destroyers track us however deep we dive. Our friends disappear one by one, and we know our turn is coming." The psychological impact on surviving U-boat crews was devastating. Men who had once considered themselves maritime knights now saw their submarines as steel coffins. The cramped living conditions, previously endured as temporary hardships, became symbols of their encirclement. The very qualities that had made German submariners effective, their sense of elite status, their faith in superior technology, their belief in ultimate victory, crumbled under the weight of mounting losses. On May 24, 1943, Dönitz made the most difficult decision of his naval career. He ordered all U-boats to withdraw from the North Atlantic convoy routes, effectively conceding defeat in the tonnage war that was supposed to have brought Britain to its knees. The submarine offensive that had sunk over 2,600 Allied merchant ships was effectively finished. But the symbolic meaning of the U-boat withdrawal extended far beyond naval statistics. German submarines had represented the Third Reich's most effective weapon against Allied supply lines, their best hope of preventing American industrial power from reaching European battlefields. When the Wolfpacks retreated to Norwegian fjords and French bunkers, they carried with them the last realistic prospect of German victory in World War II. The contrast between German expectations and American achievements was nowhere more evident than in the Liberty ship program. Hitler and his admirals had assumed that sinking merchant vessels would cripple Allied logistics faster than American shipyards could respond. They fundamentally misunderstood the nature of democratic industrial mobilization. American workers didn't build ships to fulfill government quotas or ideological mandates. They built them because their brothers, husbands, and sons needed those ships to carry the tools of liberation across the Atlantic. Each Liberty ship represented not just tonnage, but democracy's promise to the world, that free people, working together, could outproduce any totalitarian system. By war's end, American shipyards had launched 2751 Liberty ships and 534 Victory ships, representing over 38 million tons of cargo capacity, more than twice the entire British merchant fleet at the start of the war. This was abundance on a scale that fascist regimes dependent on compulsion and conquest could never match. The welding torch wielded by American shipyard workers in round-the-clock shifts had proven mightier than the submarine periscope. Democracy's tools of construction had defeated fascism's weapons of destruction in the most fundamental way possible, by simply building faster than the enemy could destroy. The human cost of this victory was enormous. Over 3,500 Allied merchant ships and 175 warships were sunk in the Atlantic, claiming the lives of 72,000 Allied naval and merchant seamen. These men died not in spectacular battles witnessed by millions, but in lonely struggles against cold water and crushing depths, often with no one to record their sacrifice except the sea itself. Yet their deaths purchased something precious: the demonstration that free societies could match totalitarian ruthlessness with democratic determination. Every merchant sailor who stayed at his post while torpedo tracks foamed toward his ship, every convoy escort commander who turned toward attacking submarines instead of away, every shipyard worker who added another well to another Liberty ship was fighting
For the same fundamental principle, that free people had the right to choose their own destiny. For Germany, the failure of the U-boat campaign meant more than military defeat. It represented the collapse of an entire strategic vision. Dönitz and his submariners had believed that superior technology, tactical innovation, and martial dedication could overcome numerical disadvantage. They learned, at the cost of 783 submarines and 30,000 lives, that no amount of individual excellence could match the combined resources of aroused democracies. In the end, the Battle of the Atlantic was decided not by superior seamanship or advanced technology, but by the fundamental difference between societies that created and societies that destroyed. American Liberty ships, British codebreakers, and Allied convoy escorts represented the productive power of free peoples united in common cause. The welding torch that built those Liberty ships had become something more than a tool. It was a symbol of democracy's deepest strength. While fascist regimes could only take what others had built, democratic societies could create abundance that dwarfed any enemy's capacity for destruction. In the workshops of American shipyards, in the minds of British cryptographers, in the courage of merchant sailors from every Allied nation, freedom had found its most powerful weapons. The gray waters of the North Atlantic, which had witnessed so much death and destruction, had also witnessed the birth of a new understanding: that democracy's greatest victory was not the defeat of its enemies, but the demonstration that free peoples, working together, could build a world worthy of their sacrifice. The submarines that had terrorized the Atlantic were gone, but the ships they had failed to stop would carry that understanding to every corner of the world. The submarines retreated, defeated not by a single silver bullet, but by the overwhelming weight of free men united by a common cause. The welding torch, the cipher machine, and the humble freighter, these were the true weapons of liberty, and their victory was absolute. They ensured that history would not be written by the hunter, but by the builder. If you want to hear more untold stories of grit, innovation, and courage that changed the course of World War II, then make sure to follow us and like this video. Your support helps us keep bringing history's most important battles and breakthroughs to life.